Hello, we're back and we're covering Baruch Spinoza. Spinoza is a Dutch thinker of Jewish extraction who was born in 1632 and died in 1677. So he is 17th century European philosopher who is known as a rationalist. Okay, so given that he's known as a rationalist, this is a key to understanding how we're working with reason, and then likewise how it is that he could justify the existence of God by way of rational principles alone. Okay, and then so the key thing though is that the way in which Spinoza understands God is unlike a traditional personal view of how it is that we understand God. So we could start thinking of his perspective as with the line, God is not a person who stands outside of nature. Okay, so that's key to understanding what's often termed Spinoza's pantheism. So God is central, but yet God is impersonal and indistinguishable from what we call nature, the universe, laws, reason, animating force, and also doesn't exist in time as we understand it individually and specifically. Okay, so whatever is in God, whatever is in God for Spinoza, and so nothing can exist or be conceived without God. Okay, so as we continue, we're thinking that God is not understood as dispensing of favors and miracles in a traditional sense. So, like we pointed out, this is not a personal God, but rather a way of thinking about God rationally, and more specifically, how this God is understood in terms of Stoicism. So he owes a debt of gratitude to the Stoic thinkers, whereby when we understand a Stoic working through of nature, we're seeing that view of nature, or physis, as inherently logical, and we understood that as logos. So in other words, with the Stoics, you always have this triadic structure whereby you have ethos, logos, and physis, and that logos component is the rational component, which is how it is that we understand the logical component. So the logical and the physical components are tied in. And so what that means also is that something that we pointed out with the Stoics is that we are then deterministic. So in other words, this is also important for Spinoza. So in order to get to know God, we don't get to know God personally for Spinoza. And remember too that his views were so controversial and radical that this earned him an excommunication from his community in Amsterdam at the time. That's how radical this was. So when we're wanting to get closer to God, his proposal is that we study nature, and we also study nature by way of science as well. So in other words, understanding scientific laws, understanding nature, understanding philosophy are going to be ways in which we're understanding how it is that God is understood for Spinoza as encompassing the whole. Okay, so in other words, we have two ways of looking at life. So one is under the aspect of time, and then also under the aspect of eternity. So Spinoza is wanting to direct our attention to the way that we're looking at our lives by way of philosophy and rationally, so that we're understanding it under the aspect of eternity, because with time is too specific for the way that he understands God. And so when we are only understanding time, we're not taking in the whole picture, and likewise, we're not taking in the way in which God is understood as a whole. i.e., the whole of nature as well. So, in other words, the important thing here is that we are then keying into a deterministic universe so that we're wanting to work with the way things are as opposed to the way things are. So there's not a special force that's above the way that things are working logically and physically in the universe to be something that we term free will. And so this is probably the most controversial part, not only for the Stoics, but also for Spinoza. And but it's keying us into this idea that Spinoza is thinking of the world rationally. In other words, the way that he worked through his proposal that God is everything, that his pantheism is a geometrical, rational way in which God is understood, as opposed to this faith-based way that Christians usually understand God. Okay, and so this Spinoza's God is purely rational. But yet at the same time, it's pointing us in a direction that is metaphysical, and that metaphysical direction is what we're really wanting to focus on as well, in the sense that when we are thinking metaphysically, we're working to understand how it is that there's a relation of parts to the whole. And so what we're looking at here is that if we're going to understand God as the whole, that means that we are a part of that to be a relation to the whole. So God is understood as being for Spinoza, all of existence. In other words, all of existence is God. And that pantheistic vision helps us understand that we are related to everything by way of being a different mode of God. So each person is a different mode or a different expression of what God is. So everything that we see around us also represent different modes of being, and likewise, if they are different modes of being, that means that they are different expressions of what God is, and God is then the whole of everything, okay? And there's no way of going above and beyond that to something that looks like free will for Spinoza. So I think we're just going to end it there, and I'll talk to you later. Thank you.